The morning I met Karen, I should have trusted my gut. She wore a blazer in the middle of July, carried a clipboard like a badge, and greeted me with a tone that felt less like welcome to the neighborhood and more like a veiled warning. "I'm Karen Dunhill, HOA Board President acting interim, but it'll be permanent soon," she said, stepping onto my porch uninvited. "You're the one who bought lot 17. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, shaking her hand with the practiced politeness the Marines had drilled into me. "Name's Briggs, just retired. Figured I'd settle somewhere quiet." Her eyes scanned the handmade rocking chair by my door, the wind chimes made from old brass casings, and the split-rail fence stretching along my east side. She pursed her lips. "We'll need to talk about that fence and a few other things." I didn't flinch. It's been there longer than the HOA. My deed includes it. Karen tapped her clipboard. "Well, there's an easement you may not be aware of. An old fire trail runs right through it. The HOA has plans to reopen it as a footpath." I glanced toward the overgrown patch behind the fence. Thorny, narrow, barely visible. "That trail hasn't been used in 40 years, and it cuts right through my property." She smiled like someone who knew the rules and liked bending them. "It's not about usage, it's about access." That was our first conversation. It didn't get better after that. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 3 official violation notices printed on HOA letterhead, slid into bright red envelopes, and pinned to my door like eviction warnings. The first complained about my porch furniture. The second claimed my outdoor lighting was non-standard. The third was more serious: unauthorized obstruction of legal HOA easement, mandatory removal of fencing within 7 days. 7 days, no hearing, no prior notice, just a command. I attended the next HOA board meeting held in the community clubhouse. Karen sat at the head of the table like a judge presiding over a trial she'd already decided. "Mr. Briggs," he said as I walked in, "you'll want to take a seat. You're on the agenda." The room smelled like lemon polish and entitlement. When my name came up, Karen clicked a remote and projected a faded map onto the wall. A thin dotted line ran directly across my property. "This is the original easement recorded in 1973, she declared. "Several of us feel it's time to restore access for safety, for aesthetics." I stood slowly, voice level. "With all due respect, I bought that land in good faith. There's no record of active easement maintenance, no signs, no mention from the county. That trail hasn't been used in decades." Karen waved a hand. "The HOA has authority to reclaim shared access features, especially when voted upon by the board." I scanned the room, a few nods, a few blank stares. One elderly woman mouthed, "Sorry," I asked. "And when did this vote happen?" Karen flipped a page on her clipboard. "Emergency vote. 2 days ago. Approved unanimously 3 votes to none." Of course, Karen and her 2 hand-picked allies, a board of 3, deciding fate for dozens. I left the meeting not angry but focused. I'd seen power games before. From jungle politics in Kandahar to command disputes on aircraft carriers. The trick wasn't to yell or threaten, that it was to wait. 2 mornings later, I heard the sound: crack, thud, snap. I stepped out onto the porch. A landscaping crew in neon vests was dismantling my fence plank by plank. A bobcat idled nearby, already chewing into the underbrush where the trail had once run. Karen stood nearby with a Starbucks cup and that same smug smile. "You were notified," she called out over the whine of machinery. "We're within our rights." I walked straight up to the crew boss. "You touch another post, you'll be dealing with my attorney and the sheriff." He hesitated. Karen stormed over, waving another paper. "This is HOA approved. He can't obstruct a designated access point." I took the document, a memo, 1 paragraph, citing their own vote, with no legal signatures, no survey, no third-party validation. "I don't recall the HOA having the authority to redraw boundary lines." She leaned in, her tone acidic. "This is Pine Rock Estates, Mr. Briggs. Things work differently here. If you can't follow the rules, maybe you should find somewhere else to live." I didn't reply. I simply turned, walked back to my porch, and sat in my rocking chair as they tore down 50 feet of hand-built fence. But I wasn't done, not even close. By the end of the week, the trail was complete, if you could call it that. Gravel dumped hastily over soft ground, poorly packed, already washing out at the edges. And where my fence once stood, Karen had posted 2 metal signs, shiny and smug: HOA easement, no trespassing, board approved. I didn't say a word, not to Karen, not to the board. I just watched. She, on the other hand, strutted past my window daily, walked her schnauzer straight down the trail like it was a catwalk. Sometimes she'd pause, just to stare at my porch, smirking, sipping her overpriced coffee, daring me to react. Then she started letting her friends use the path too. A small group at first. They'd stroll through with tote bags and sunglasses, peering into my backyard like it was a park. One even waved. Karen didn't want access, she wanted dominance. It wasn't about rules, it was about control. That became clearer when I found the invoice in my mailbox folded neatly. sealed in a HOA branded envelope, easement restoration, assessment $3,248 due in 30 days. It was itemized even gravel clearing, signage, HOA administrative labor. I stared at the number, then at the signature at the bottom, Karen Dunhill, HOA president. So, not only had she destroyed my fence, she was now charging me for it. I called the county land office. The person on the other end, a tired-sounding clerk named Ray, sighed the moment I explained. Pine Rock. Yeah, we've had complaints. But unless it's a criminal matter or involves disputed ownership, our hands are tied. Civil dispute. I need to take it to court. And the easement, I asked. Is it real? Ray tapped his keyboard. There's an easement on record from 1973, but it's vague, says access lane. Reserved between parcels if maintained by owners or governing body. If it hasn't been maintained, may be considered abandoned. Defined may. I said, that's for a judge. Of course it was. That night, I stood at the edge of my property, flashlight in hand, scanning the old trail. I found rusted nails from my broken fence, pieces of split rail that once kept coyotes out, a dozen boot prints I didn't recognize. That trail, that easement, whatever Karen wanted to call it, had become her tool for humiliating me. I'd played by the rules. Time to rewrite them. I began researching first the HOA bylaws. They were online, buried in a poorly maintained website. Karen had structured them with clever language, always favoring the board's discretion. Vague clauses about community interest, shared utility, and historical rights-of-way. It gave her just enough ambiguity to justify her overreach. Next, I looked into property law, county records, easement disputes, abandoned usage rights. It was like navigating a legal swamp, but I wasn't looking for a fight anymore. I was looking for leverage, and I found it by accident. Buried in the county's digital archives was a recent public notice, dense, dull, easily ignored. It was a listing for upcoming land auctions due to unpaid property taxes. I scrolled lazily until I saw it. Parcel ID 27-581 Bo NER of record, Dunhill, Karen J. Status, tax delinquent. Foreclosure pending, auction date, August 14th. I blinked. Read it again. Karen's land, her pristine slice of HOA heaven, was up for public auction. I cross-checked the parcel number with a property map. It matched her address perfectly. According to county law, if taxes went unpaid past the deadline, the land would be foreclosed and sold at a silent auction. No public signs. No announcements beyond the legal listing. It was real, it was legal, and it was happening in 10 days. I closed my laptop, heartbeat steady, breath measured. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Karen had mocked my rocking chair. Karen had torn down my fence. Karen had billed me to violate my own rights. But Karen had also forgotten to pay her taxes, and now her throne sat on a ticking clock. I began preparing quietly, a wire transfer to cover the auction, paperwork for a trust to avoid HOA interference, a quiet call to my lawyer just to confirm the language of the sale. I didn't need revenge in the form of shouting matches or nasty letters. I just needed one silent win, one signature, and she'd never see it coming. The auction came quietly, just like I hoped. It was held at a county annex building on a rainy Tuesday morning. No banners, no bidders with paddles, no spectacle, just a small room with bad lighting, a clock that ticked too loud, and a clerk who called out parcel numbers like a bored bingo announcer. I sat in the back, anonymous.com. Karen had no idea parcel 27-581B was third on the list. Her land, her castle, the very lot where she'd stood sipping lattes, barking orders, and posting HOA notices like royal decrees. The auctioneer glanced at the file. Opening bid $30,000. Do I have an offer? I raised my hand. 30. Cash silence. No counter. No competition. The gavel fell with a soft thunk. Sold to bidder 9. That was it. No fanfare. No applause. But in that moment, everything shifted. In the eyes of the county, I now owned the land Karen thought was hers. I kept it quiet. There was still paperwork to finalize, a deed to register, title insurance to secure. I wasn't going to tip my hand yet, not until it was untouchable. Over the next 2 weeks, I went about my business as if nothing had changed. Karen, meanwhile, doubled down on her power trip. She held another HOA cleanup day, inviting neighbors to restore the easement trail. I watched from my porch as volunteers trimmed bushes on my side of the property line, laughing like they were at a picnic. Soon we'll extend this all the way through, Karen announced cheerfully, pointing into my woods. A full loop for walking groups. Her entitlement knew no ceiling. She still strutted down the gravel path like it was her victory lap. She still ignored my privacy, my fence, and my rights. We had no idea she was trespassing on my land. Then the deed arrived, official stamped, recorded. I held it in my hands like a final puzzle piece, one that didn't just finish the picture but rewrote it. Karen's house sat squarely on a lot she no longer owned. She hadn't checked the auction notices. She hadn't paid her back taxes. She'd been too busy being queen of the cul-de-sac to notice her kingdom slipping through her fingers. Now came the move. I had my lawyer draft a letter, professional, cold, precise. It read, "Dear Miss Dunhill, as of date, the property at address has been transferred via county auction to my name, now listed as the legal and sole owner. You are hereby given 10 calendar days to vacate the premises. Failure to comply may result in legal action, including but not limited to eviction and civil penalties for trespassing. No threats, no insults, just facts." I slipped the letter into her mailbox early on a Monday morning. Then I waited. At 8:17 a.m. I saw her open it. At 8:18 a.m. I heard her scream. She stormed across the lawn barefoot, still in pajamas, and pounded on my door. "You think this is funny?" she shrieked. "This is some kind of joke." I opened the door slowly, calm, unbothered. "I assure you it's not. You can't just buy someone's house like it's a used car." "I didn't buy your house," I said. "Just the land underneath it. You technically still own the structure for now, but you'll need to remove it, or, lease it from me at a fair rate." Her face twisted. "You can't do that. This is harassment. This is abuse of power." I held up the deed. "This is county-verified property ownership. You ignored the tax notices. You violated my rights." I simply read the fine print. She stood there shaking, speechless. For the first time since I met her, Karen had no comeback, no clipboard, no power. I stepped back inside and gently shut the door. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd heard in weeks, but I wasn't finished, not yet. She was still clinging to hope, still believing she could talk her way out, bully her way through, maybe even rally the board to overturn what the county had sealed. She didn't know what was coming next. I had plans for that land, and I didn't need her blessing to execute them, because while she'd spent her days trying to enforce HOA rules, I'd spent mine learning how to own the game. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting 3 days later. It was held in the community clubhouse, the same one where she'd once lectured me about compliance and decorum. But this time her voice was shriller, her eyes panicked, and the crowd noticeably smaller. I sat in the back, quiet, observing. A few neighbors glanced at me, then at her, unsure of what to believe. She stood at the front, waving papers, red-faced and flustered. "I've just been made aware of a serious fraudulent transaction involving my property," she declared, gripping the podium like it might vanish beneath her. "There's been a mistake. My land was sold at auction without notice, and this man," she jabbed a finger in my direction, "is trying to steal my home." Murmurs stirred. A man in a golf shirt raised a hand. "Is that even possible?" Karen blurted. "Of course not. It's absurd. I've lived there for 8 years. That's when the HOA's own attorney, Mr. Harrell, stood up. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Actually, it's not absurd. The records are public. The property taxes were delinquent for over 3 years. The county sent certified notices multiple times. They followed due process. The auction was legal." Karen's mouth dropped open, but I didn't see anything. Mr. Harrell didn't flinch. "That doesn't nullify the outcome. The deed is now legally in Mr. Briggs's name." She turned on the room. "You're just going to let him get away with this, after everything I've done for this neighborhood?" Someone muttered under their breath. Another rolled their eyes. I stood slowly. "I didn't plan this," I said, addressing the room. "I didn't set out to buy anyone's home, but I also didn't plan on having my fence torn down, my property rights violated, and then be charged $3,000 for the privilege." Karen spun toward me. "You're doing this out of spite." "No," I replied. "I'm doing this out of principle. You weaponized the rules, manipulated the board, and tried to make me bend. I didn't break. I adapted." There was a long pause, and then applause. Not a standing ovation, not a cheer, but enough polite claps to make Karen visibly shrink. The meeting adjourned in awkward silence. Karen didn't say another word. She stalled, of course, filed a last-ditch civil petition, claimed the auction was invalid, tried to dispute the tax assessments. But the courts weren't interested. The county had receipts. They'd given her every chance, and she'd ignored them. 2 weeks later, the final ruling came down. Eviction approved. Karen was ordered to vacate within 10 days. She appealed, denied. I offered her a graceful exit, sign a lease at market rate, or remove the structure herself. She refused. "Enjoy your empty lot, you heartless bastard." She spat as movers hauled her last boxes into a rented U-Haul. I didn't reply. I simply handed her the lease one final time. She tore it in half. Fine by me. 2 days later, a demolition crew arrived. It took less than 3 hours to flatten what was once her HOA headquarters. No fanfare, no ceremony, just steel, dust, and a clean slate. The following week I rebuilt my fence. This time, I made it higher, thicker, stronger. Neighbors walked by and waved. Some stopped to chat. Others shook my hand, quietly grateful the tyranny of Karen was finally over. At the next HOA election, Karen's remaining allies were voted out. A new board was installed, sensible, transparent, inclusive. They offered me the presidency. I declined. "I didn't come here to run anything," I said. "I just came for peace, and at long last, I had it. Not because I shouted louder or played dirtier, but because I paid attention, stayed patient, and used the same system she once used to crush others. She underestimated the quiet ones. She mistook silence for weakness. She never saw the slow burn. Now, when I sit on my porch with coffee in hand, the fence restored, the landmine again, I don't hear gravel crunching under strangers' feet. I don't see HOA memos stapled to my door. I hear birds. I watch the sunrise. I breathe. Revenge wasn't loud. It was deliberate. And in the end, it was permanent.